Hey kids, it's Chef Jack here with another batch of independent comics reviews in the hopes of giving you, and us, let's be honest, a break from the absolute disaster that's been Marvel Comics lately. The indie comic scene right now is thriving and vibrant, and if you haven't taken a look at some of these titles, maybe we can convince you to do so. So without further ado, let's get started. The one-star books. These are the worst. Not merely bad, but awful and horrendous. Avoid them at all costs. Sisters of Sorrow #1. This comic started out with a great concept, at least on paper. A group of nuns wages a vigilante war on criminals in Los Angeles. And it's going to be written by the guy who created the Sons of Anarchy TV series, so, I'm so there. But the finished product does not live up to the promise. The characters are all poorly defined in one note. The dialogue is repetitive and boring. The issue doesn't even flesh out the group's transition from helpless civilians to gun-toting killers. Going from one to the other is almost instantaneous, and there's no real justification for the change in the first place. The artwork just adds to the problem. It's murky, and messy, and it's heavy-handed, and in spots it's way too difficult to tell one character from the other. Combined with the bad dialogue, it just makes the story confusing to follow. So if I were you, I would give this one a pass because it's not worth reading at all. The two-star books. These comics might be bad, but there's usually one or two things that save them from being truly horrible. Galacticon #1. This comic, believe it or not, is based on a heavy metal album appropriately named Galacticon by Brendan Small. If you've never heard of him, he's the guy behind Metalocalypse. But now that that's all the way, let me get to the review. This comic is a mess. It's all over the place. Conceptually, yeah, it's hilarious, and it's filled with tiny little details that are the hallmark of the best parts of science fiction and fantasy worlds. Things like a stripper planet named Amberia, or robot divorce court judges who have their empathy circuits removed, or, the robot sidekick who speaks only in musical notation that it turns out you can actually play along with if you know how to play the guitar. But that's it. That's all that's here. The dialogue is otherwise stilted, the story is boring, the huge jokes just aren't that funny, the hero is utterly unlikable and off-putting, and there's nothing really to enjoy here except the details. Sure, they're fun, but they're not enough to carry the issue. I was really hoping for better and was really disappointed. ROM vs. Transformers, Shining Knight #1. This one really disappointed me. I am normally a fan of both the Transformers series and the ROM series, and I figured that the combination of the two would be a natural. Unfortunately, while the meeting of the two Hasbro franchises makes for some really fun artwork, the writers of the series are not capable of matching the strength of the illustrations with a story that's even worth reading. The message here is, bigotry is wrong. You got that, folks? Bigotry is wrong. They hit us over the head with it relentlessly, as if we didn't already know this. The only saving grace for this issue is the art and the colors, like I said. Otherwise, there is nothing worth wasting your money on here. The 3-star books. These comics are just average. They fall neither on the good end of the spectrum, nor the bad. Ghost Station Zero #1. This issue blows its doors open with the type of cold open you'd see in a Sean Connery Bond movie. This opening sequence is energetic and it's exciting, and it really got my hopes up for the rest of the issue. Unfortunately, that was about as exciting as it got. Every single spy cliché was present, but they weren't included with enough cleverness to overcome the fact that they were clichés. It was almost like Anthony Johnston was writing by checkboxes. Informant who's actually an assassin, check. Casino, check. Chase sequence, check. That's not to say that the issue is a complete loss. There are some lively moments here and there, and they bring back the fun. But there are too few and far between to keep things from grinding to a complete halt. And the art isn't up to propping the narrative up either. The art's stiff, as if you're looking at a lot of Rob Liefeld-style splash panels, beside the fact that they aren't actually splash panels. So while this issue isn't truly bad, the best I can say about it is that it's bland. Very bland. Lazarus X +66 #1. With this book, we're dropped into the deep end where the world is divided up by the families, quote unquote, a group of wealthy corporate types, and you're either a slave to the families or else you're a waste. There's a wall of text at the beginning and at the end that explains all of this, and I'm sure it's going to be important to the series later, but it had absolutely nothing to do with this particular issue. Most of the story in this book involves military training, specifically of a bunch of recruits who are trying to join a special forces unit. The training's pretty brutal, and the stark, washed-out art pairs pretty well with this part of the story. Thing is, the rest of the story is just the same old, same old. I mean, seriously, if you've ever seen the old film G.I. Jane with Demi Moore, you've read the story that's in this comic. And to be honest, the G.I. Jane story kind of sucked. So, while this issue wasn't horrible, it also wasn't unique at all. It wasn't special in any way. If you're into military comics, go ahead and give it a look. It's not going to do you any harm. But otherwise, don't bother. Spiritus number 1. To me, Spiritus number 1 is a stone-cold tragedy. You see, on the one hand, the story, which is about being wrongfully convicted of a crime, it was really well written and enjoyable. I mean, seriously, the writing was just amazing. And within the context of the futuristic setting, the basic story just became that more compelling. There was actually a mysterious and almost psychedelic overtone to it that I found entertaining as hell. That said, Michael Kennedy's artwork was shit. I mean, seriously, look at this crap. The art here is so bad that it's jarring. It takes your attention away from an otherwise wonderful story. If it weren't for the art, this book would be much higher rated, but as it is, I can't give this more than 3 stars, because the art alone, if it in any lesser story, the art would make it a 1-star book. So to balance it out, here we are. The 4-star books. Now we're getting to the good stuff. These are the comics we can actually recommend. Alien Bounty Hunter number 1. This is a really strong opening issue. It definitely has the feel of the Men in Black with some Dog the Bounty Hunter or Alien Nation. Little BPRD thrown in for flavor. The characters are fun and they develop naturally. Nothing is forced. The dialogue is absolutely natural. The conflict is believable. And there's a rising sense of action that is teased for upcoming issues. The art is absolutely brilliant and beautiful. And I hope that the crew who puts this comic together are able to keep it up. The one problem that this comic has for me is that it's being released to test the waters for a potential movie, which is why they're only doing 5 issues instead of making it an ongoing series. I kind of wish I hadn't been told that because it's a bit of a disappointment, and it's what makes this a 4-star book and not a 5-star book. Moonstruck number 1. I was actually surprised by how much I enjoyed this title. I normally don't go for frothy romantic comedy comic books. Not to say that there isn't a place for that kind of book. It's just that normally they don't appeal to me. They're not my style. This one, though, was entertaining, and it was beautifully drawn, and it had interesting characters, and the script was fantastic. The story just flows really, really well. The art has just enough anime to it, and a bit from the Adventure Time cartoons, and so even Saturday Morning Bugs Bunny. Everything involved is just engaging here, and it's fun. Now, it isn't perfect by any means. I don't want to say that it is, because sometimes the cartoony art gets just a little bit too cartoony, and occasionally the characters descend into stereotype. But still, there is much more to like about this book than to dislike. The 5-star books. These books are the best of the best, at least for this week. These are the ones that we recommend the most. Generation Gone number 1. Guys, if you're tired of shit storytelling over at that other comics company I won't name, this is the issue you need to pick up. It's like a breath of fresh air. This book has a fairly straightforward plot. It's about 3 millennials who are recruited against their knowledge by a genius at DARPA to test a secret project. But that doesn't get into the depth of this story. Alash Kut has constructed this in a way that it just grabbed me. There are entire pages in which volumes are spoken, but not one word of dialogue appears. And even better, the conversations that do appear between the characters feel real. They feel honest. Andre Arau's art goes very well with this narrative, and it resonated with me. He plays with a lot of angles. I won't spoil it for you, but the ending of this book is intense, and it sets up the next issue gloriously, and I cannot wait to see it. James Bond, Kill Chain, #1. Here we go, folks. This book is everything that Ghost Station Zero wanted to be when it grew up. This story is thoroughly entertaining, with enough intrigue and mystery and creativity to keep us wanting more. I mean, yeah, sure, some of the elements of this story seem familiar, but they're used with such originality that you don't mind at all. I mean, for crying out loud, this is a Bond story. Bond created the modern spy genre, so of course it's going to have some of the old tropes. Anyway, there's enough here to fill your plate while really leaving you wanting more. If I had any complaints at all, it would be the story is just a touch too fast-paced, and the art isn't the most striking I've ever seen. But in neither case are these fatal weaknesses. They don't keep it from being a great book. I really look forward to seeing what comes next. John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction #1. The story in this book is heavy in atmosphere, and it doesn't take too long to build up a feeling of tension that can be downright creepy at times. The plot itself is pretty familiar. The crew of a starship comes across a derelict vessel, discovers that something horrible and scary has happened. But the specifics of the story stand out as unique. What is really impressive to me is that despite having seen this story in everything from Star Trek and Aliens to, I mean, hell, even an episode of Firefly did this story, I had absolutely no idea where this particular version of it was going to end up. And even now, I've got no idea where it's going to go next. Every time I expected something in this issue, the plot would zig when I thought it was going to zag, which it's always a pleasant surprise. This is just a fun read, guys. Redlands #1. Guys, I'm not going to lie. This comic book is gripping. It is suspenseful, and it's going to have readers asking themselves just what the hell did they just read? I am not going to give anything away here because you really need to get it yourself and experience it yourself. I will say, however, that this book is scary. If you're a fan of horror stories in general and horror comic books in particular, this is one you are going to want to have. It harkens back to the classic monster movies of the 50s and of all the exploitation films of the 70s. It's got me wanting to read the next issue right now rather than wait for it. It's just that good. This was a great week for horror stories, and this one is actually better than John Carpenter. Zojacon #1. On the surface, this title seems to be about a grieving mother who deals with the loss of a child by withdrawing from the world into her own private delusions. At least that's how it seems. When you go deeper into the story, you find that it is way more than that. It's very personal, and I just don't know how to explain it. This is a very strange book, don't get me wrong. It has a surreal quality to it, but nonetheless, it's amazingly enjoyable. While reading it, you are going to stop every once in a while and go, whoa, I never, wow, hold on. Kelly and Lansing, the writers, they are asking us, the readers, to use our intelligence and our imagination to draw our own conclusions as to what ultimately is going on in this story. I mean, is the main character just crazy? Or has she actually been transported to another planet? Either are just as valid a conclusion, and it's up to us to decide it individually. I think it's brave and amazing, and it works completely. But folks, what did you think about these comics? Was I right? Was I wrong? Was I, just completely full of it? Tell me why you think so in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more of them, click like and subscribe and the little notification bell in the corner so you don't miss any of our future videos. And if you feel like helping out, we've got a Patreon page and a VidMe page set up, and there are links below. Feel free to wander over and drop $1 in the till. But even if you don't do that, thanks for taking the time out to watch. We do appreciate it, and we hope to catch you next time. Thank you very, very much for watching.